Hello, I welcome you all to this wonderful and exciting topic called the human nervous system. So we're going to talk about this system here for biology, okay, for all levels. Okay, so the human nervous system, it is part of what we call the coordination system, okay. Now, under coordination, you have this part called the nervous system that helps to coordinate the body, as the name suggests. So, the human nervous system is made up of the nerves. Okay, so you can see how different nerves are developed in the human body. But all in all, it's made up of three things. Okay, that is the brain, the spinal cord, and the nerves. So these are the three things that make up the human nervous system. So when you look at this, you'll find that all the nerves are connected to the brain and the spinal cord. Okay, so the brain and the spinal cord are also connected here, and this is where all the human nerves actually develop. So you can see that the brain here, it's made up of the cerebrum, cerebellum, and then the spinal cord starts from here, and you have all these different types of nerves. Okay, and these are their names, which you don't have to memorize all these names. Okay, so this is what we are talking about, the human nervous system. Okay, so these two, the brain and the spinal cord, they make up what we call the central nervous system, while all the nerves now are called the peripheral nervous system. So the brain together with the spinal cord here, these make up what we call the CNS, or central nervous system. Then all the nerves that are coming from the brain and the spinal cord, we call them the peripheral nervous the peripheral nervous system. So this is just an introduction to this topic. What are we talking about? We're saying the human nervous system is made up of three things. We can say it is actually made up of the central nervous system, which is made up of what? The brain and the spinal cord. And then it's also made up of the peripheral nervous system, which makes up all the nerves that are around the body. So now, what are these nerves and what do they do? Okay, what do they do? So their main function here is to coordinate the body functions. They coordinate the body functions. We're going to look at how they do that. Okay, so now let's look at what neurons are, and we are going to also try and explain how this nervous system is able to coordinate the body, okay, functions in the body. So in the nervous system here, we have what we call messages, okay, and these messages are what are transmitted by this nervous system, and they're transmitted in a form called what? Electric impulses, okay, or sometimes we call them nerve impulses. Okay, so now these messages here, they simply come from what we call sense. They come from what we call sense organs. Okay, that is where these messages come from. Okay, so these messages come from what we call sense organs. Okay, and we have many types of sense organs. Okay, just to mention, we have the sense organ called the skin. Okay, we have the eyes. Okay, all these are sense organs. Okay, just to mention a few. So these messages are, so the sense organ, you have what we call now a sensory neuron, which comes just after it's connected to the sense organ. So you have a sensory nerve. Okay, so now the sensory nerve now, it's what will pick up what we call stimuli. Okay, there is what we call stimuli. So the stimuli is simply a change in the environment which is detected by the sense organ. So they are called sense organ because they are able to sense. Okay, the skin can sense, the eye can sense. They're able to sense stimuli, changes to the environment. So stimuli is simply a change to the environment. So the sense organs, they will sense that, and once they sense that, they pick it up and then they convert it to what we call an impulse. Okay, an impulse. And this impulse now, what converts it, it's here, this is where the conversion takes place. The stimuli is changed to a sensory what? Nerve. Okay, and then from a sensory nerve now it goes to what we call the CNS. The CNS, we said, is the brain and the spinal cord. Then this will take it to what we call the motor neuron, the motor neuron or the motor nerve. Okay, and then this will take it to the effector organs. Okay, and we're going to look at this perfectly and see how all this process actually takes place. Okay, so that's what we're going to look at. So let's look at the neurons now, and we see how they're able to carry out this function. Okay, so the basic functional unit, okay, the basic functional unit of the nervous system, these are the neurons. Okay, or nerve cells is one and the same thing. That's why I was saying sensory nerve or sensory neuron. So a neuron is a cell which is part of the nervous system, right? Okay, and they are called the basic. So the basic functional unit is just a definition for a cell. Remember, a cell is defined as a basic functional unit of a living organism. So here we're just saying the cells that are found in the nervous system, we call them the neurons or the nerve cells. And there are three types that include the sensory neuron, which picks up the changes, okay, the stimuli. Okay, the sensory, they are connected to the sense organ. That's why they are called sensory. So the sensory, they are connected to the sense organs such as the skin, the eyes, the ears. Okay, all those sense organs, right? The tongue is a sense organ. The nose is a sense organ. Okay, and then you have the relay neuron. The relay neuron, it's in between. Okay, its function is to act as what? A connector or an intermediate, a multipolar, pyramidal. These are just the other names that they use to refer to the relay neurons. Okay, they relay the message from the sensory to the motor neurons. That's why they called relay neurons, and we are going to look at how these are. Okay, so you have three types: the sensory neurons, relay neurons, which is called the connector, intermediate, multipolar or pyramidal, and you have the motor the motor neurons. Okay, so the functional basic unit is called a neuron, and you have these three types. Now let's look at now in the form of a diagram. We see these different types of neurons. Okay, so we have this is the motor neuron. Okay, so you should know how to label the motor neuron. Okay, you should know how to draw it, know some parts under the motor neuron. So as you can see here, it has this part here which is called the cell body, and in the cell body here you have in the middle here a nucleus. Okay, you have the nucleus there. So now the cell body, it is what performs all the function of a cell, right? Okay, for this whole motor neuron. Okay, so this one is called the cell body, and then it has these things that protrude out, and we call these dendrites. Okay, we call them dendrites. So these are dendrites. Okay, these are dendrites, and these are what receives. So the impulse comes here on the dendrites. Okay, so you have impulses, what we call messages, coming all over like this. Okay, and then once this thing is done, the message comes down like this. Okay, it will come down, and here it is connected now to the effector organ. For example, this effector organ could be a muscle. A muscle is one example. So you find that most of these nerves, they are connected to our muscles. Okay, so now this message that is coming, it's coming, for example, from the central nervous system, and we said the central nervous system is made up of two things. That is what? The brain okay, the brain and the what? Spinal cord. Okay, the brain as well as the spinal cord. So these have got a job now of they have a job of interpreting the messages. Okay, so from the CNS, the message comes to these dendrites and they relay it all over. Okay, so it is passing through what we call the axon. Okay, it is passing through what we call the axon. Okay, so this is the axon here. So the axon is this a straight structure, okay, that connects all the way, and this part is called the axon of Hewlock. Okay, this part is called the axon of Hewlock, so that is the axon there, and then the axon is myelinated, okay, by this myelin sheath. So these are the myelin sheath that myelinate the axon. Okay, so the axon is a long process, okay, that will just transmit the impulse all the way down. Now let's look at the sensory neuron. So the sensory neuron, for example, it is connected to a sense organ. Okay, for example, if this sense organ that is connected is a skin, okay, this is the skin. So now what happens is this: if maybe you prick yourself with a needle, okay, let's say you prick yourself with a needle on this skin. Now this, what you feel is what we call pain. You're going to get pain, eh? So now this pain, before it is known to be pain, it is picked up here as simply what? A stimuli. Okay, it will be picked up here as simply a stimuli. Okay, it will be picked up as what? A stimuli. Okay, so the sense organ, so you can see the sensory neuron is always connected to the sense organ. Okay, and the receptor cell. So the receptor cell is part of the sense organ. So the receptor is something. Receptor means to receives. It will receive what? A stimuli. So example of a stimuli could be pain. Okay, pain is an example of a stimuli. Okay, you prick yourself with a needle or you touch fire. Okay, that pain will be picked up as an impulse, and then it comes all the way down like this. Eh? So it will come all the way down like this. You can see it is also myelinated. Eh? Then the sensory neuron, it has its cell body outward. Okay, you see the cell body here is at the far end, but here the cell body is outward, and it has the nucleus and many organs of the cell, and then it comes down like that. Okay, so this part now is what goes to the CNS, to the central nervous system. Okay, this is the part that goes to the central nervous system. So you can see this comes from the sense organ, it goes like that. So this is called a dendrite as well. Right? So now the axon is only called an axon when it leaves the cell body. So you can see this one, it's leaving the cell body, so it's called an axon. But away from the cell body, we just call so no wonder why here it's called the dendrite. Eh? Okay, when it leaves the cell body, that's why it's called the axon. So you have dendrites again. So these, they go connect themselves to this now, what we call the relay neuron. So the relay neuron is mostly found in the CNS. Okay, in the CNS. Okay, so it relays the message. Now this passes on to this. Okay, so from this the message goes to the relay neuron, and then it comes like this. Eh? So the order, this one is the first one because it's connected to the sense organ. It will bring the message to the brain and the spinal cord. It passes it to the relay neuron, and the relay neuron brings it here, and then it ends at the muscles. Okay, so this is basically what is happening under here. Okay, so let's move on. We see something. Okay, so the sensory neuron, these are neurons that carry impulses, like I said, from the sense organ. So the sense organ, they are also called receptors. Okay, and these, they carry it from the sense organ. That's the thing to know. It comes from the sense organ to the CNS, called the central nervous system. Okay, so a receptor is any organ that can detect stimulus and convert the information to an electric impulse. Okay, and I've given you examples of these sense organ: the skin, the eyes, the ears, the nose, and the mouth. Okay, the tongue specifically. So the sensory neuron, it has got certain characteristics, and these characteristics is that they carry impulses from what sense organs to the CNS that I've already said. They have long dendrons and short axons. So you can see the axon is very short, but the dendron is what? Long. Okay, so this is called the dendron. So the dendron, so they are made up of the dendron and an axon. So remember I said when it's coming from the cell body like this, it's called an axon. Then when it's going towards the cell body, it's called a dendron. This word dendron. So the sensory receptor here is a sense organ, and the message goes up to the cell body, and then it goes to the axon. So now the axon now connects this to something. Okay, so we have what we call the synaptic bulb. Okay, this is where the message will be passed to the relay neuron. Okay, so at each myelin sheath you have what we call a node of Ranvier. Okay, this is called the node of Ranvier. It is found at each myelin sheath. Okay, and that's the cell body there. So this is the sensory neuron, and these are the functions that it generally carries out. Okay, so let's look at the motor neuron. So the motor neuron, these are neurons that carry impulses from where now? The CNS to the effectors. So you should know the difference between a sensory neuron and a motor neuron. So a sensory neuron carries impulses from the sense organ or the receptor to the CNS, and then the motor neuron gets it from the CNS to the what? To the effector. What are the effectors? These are organs of the body, such as what? The muscles. So an effector is any part of the body that carries out a response to a nervous impulse. Most effectors are either glands, body organs such as muscles. So motor neurons have the following characteristics. One, they carry impulses from CNS to the effectors, and they have long axons and short dendrons. These, they do not have dendrons. So their cell bodies are terminally located at the end. So you can see here the cell bodies at the end. Okay, so they have long distance. Okay, long axons. Okay, so this is a motor neuron. You should know how to draw it, how to label it. Okay, because I've seen questions that can appear like that. So let's look at the last one, which we call the relay neuron. Okay, so we have the relay neuron. So these are neurons that form a link between what? Sensory neurons and motor neurons. They are located in the central nervous system and are multipolar so as to provide many alternative paths for impulses. So they are called multipolar. Okay, so let's look at how this information actually goes. So let's say here we have what we call a receptor is what starts everything. The receptor is what starts everything. Not really, but because it also needs to get information from what it picks up what we call stimuli. Okay, so the stimuli is what begins everything. So this information, it is picked up from a stimuli, and an example of a stimuli we can talk about is what? Pain. So pain is that stimuli. Okay, and then you find that this receptor, for example, it's a sense organ. I'll give an example of a skin. Okay, so the receptor converts this stimuli into an electrical impulse, and then this receptor is an organ, and then it sends that to the sensory. Okay, it will send it to the sensory neuron. Okay, it will send it to the sensory neuron. So this is the order that I'm giving you, or the path of electrical impulse. Then the sensory neuron, remember I said it's a neuron that takes impulses from the receptor to the what? To the CNS. Okay, what is CNS? By now you know it's the central nervous system, and it is made up of the what? The brain. Okay, the brain, as well as the spinal cord. Okay, it is made up of the brain as well as the spinal cord. Okay, And then from this now, the information now here, it has been interpreted. It goes to the motor neuron. It goes to the motor neuron. Okay. That's the correct spelling. I think I've swapped U and E. Motor neuron. And then from the motor neuron now, it goes to the what? Effector organs. What is the example here? The muscle, or it could either be glands. Okay. All right. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So these 5 processes together with the stimuli. So pain was picked up by the skin. The sensory neuron converts it to an electrical impulse. Okay. So here it's now an electrical impulse. It goes to the CNS. It is what here? Here these guys, the brain and the spinal cord, they have a job of interpreting. Okay, they interpret or translate. Okay, what this electrical impulse is. So they will say, oh, there's pain coming from the skin, and then they'll take it to the motor neuron, and then the muscles will do what? They will respond. Okay, they will respond. How do the muscles respond? If you are touching something hot, you immediately pull off your hand. Okay. Now, in between each neuron, remember here, sensory, here this is where you find these relay neurons. Right? They are found in between here. Okay, these neurons. Okay. So now let's look at what is in between, what called the synapses. So let's look at a synapse. Okay, a synapse. So a synapse is a junction between two neurons. Okay. For example, this is where this is a sensory, and then here comes the relay, and then here is the motor. Okay. So sensory, relay, and motor neuron. So this junction now, this junction is called the synapse. Synapse, a junction between two neurons. So these neurons at the synapse are joined to each other, but they have gaps, okay, called the synapse. And these gaps are called the synaptic gaps or synaptic clefts, okay? Synaptic clefts or synaptic gaps. The following passage describes how the nerve impulses moves. I've already explained that. So an impulse arrives here at the synapse. So, and at the synapse here, there's what we call, at the end of each plate, there is a vesicle containing a neurotransmitter. So a neurotransmitter is released here, which will carry on the message to the next one. Okay. So these vesicles, they fuse at the presynaptic membrane. Okay. All you need to know here is that there's a neurotransmitter that helps to transmit impulses at these gaps. Okay. So now we have what we call reflex actions. A reflex action is an automatic response, automatic and stereotyped response to a stimulus. What type of stimulus? For example, how do you respond when you're in pain? Okay, or when you touch fire, how do you respond? You find that you quickly withdraw your hand from a hot object or maybe from the fire. So this is what we call a reflex action. It happens instantly, automatically, okay, without thinking twice. When you touch fire, without even thinking, you withdraw your hand. Okay, this is called a reflex action. So reflex actions are often quick, some could be slow. Okay, and the examples here: when you touch a hot object, you immediately withdraw your hand, or when you touch electricity, immediately withdraw your hand. Even jumping, when you sit on a pin, when you step on something, find that you lift your leg quickly. Blinking, okay, when someone wants to touch your eye, you find that the eyes automatically blink. A knee jerk, okay, shedding of tears when an object enters the eye. These are automatic and you can't control them most of the time. So you find that the body just responds like that. Okay, so a reflex action is an automatic and stereotyped response. And now let's look at an example. Let's look at what will happen here. This example, withdrawing a hand from a hot object. Let's look at how that will actually take place. Okay, so what happens? Okay, so now let's say you have something hot here, and you try to touch this with your fingers, or let's say this is your leg. Okay, this is your leg, and you a needle here pricks your leg. Okay, what will happen? Okay, so now what will happen here is that what will pick this up, since this is a needle, what will pick it up is the skin. The skin is what gets pricked. So the skin here will act as the what? The receptor. The skin here will act as the receptor. So since the skin is acting as a receptor here, it picks up these changes. Now here you find that the skin, it is connected by a sensory nerve. Right? So we're going to call this a sensory nerve. Sensory nerve or sensory neuron. Right? So the sensory neuron now, so this receptor, this thing converts the pain, okay, the stimuli, okay, the stimuli here, it's pain because you've been pricked by a needle. So now the sensory nerve goes to the central nervous system. Okay, since CNS, central nervous system, takes it to the motor neuron. So this is just the order of how things will take place here. From the motor neuron, it goes to the effectors, which mostly it's the muscles. Okay, mostly it's the muscles. And the last thing will be what? A response. Okay, response. How do you respond when you lift? You lift your leg because there's a needle down there. Okay, but that's how the message will flow. Okay, that's how the message will flow. Okay. All right, so here we have what we call a reflex arc. Okay, a reflex arc. Now, what is a reflex arc? A reflex arc is simply the path that takes up the message during a reflex action. Since we are from discussing here, we are from discussing a reflex action. Okay, a reflex action, we said an automatic response. So now the message goes, this path that I was showing you, all this path here is called the reflex arc, and this is what is being shown here. Okay, so you have a receptor here, this is a stimulus. Okay, and here I said the stimulus, I'm using pain, since we all understand pain. So pain is picked up by the what? The skin. So the receptor here, a good example we can give for this receptor is what? The skin. And I want you to understand this, how it goes. So the skin picks up pain, and then the receptor sensory neurons are connected to this receptor, and they take the message now. So this receptor will change this pain into what we call an impulse, electrical impulse. So this, what you are seeing here, it's an electrical impulse. It will go like this, and you can see the sensory neuron with its cell body here. It has a cell body that is outward. Okay, and then it goes like that. This is where the CNS is. So you can see this is the spinal cord, which is part of the central nervous system, and this spinal cord here, it has a protruding structure here called the ganglion, and in the ganglion here is where you have the cell body of the sensory neuron. Okay, and here we call this part the dorsal root. Okay, the dorsal root. So the message will come like that, and this is what the relay neuron is now. Okay, so the relay neuron simply takes the message, and here you have a synapse here, a gap between this sensory neuron and the relay neuron. So it's here, that's what the synaptic bulb actually happens to be. And then you have the relay neuron here. So in this part here, the information now is translated, and then it comes back through the motor neuron. It passes on the ventral root, and then it goes to the effector. And a good example of the effector here, I'll repeat again, the muscle. Okay, I think I've written a wrong spelling here. It's supposed to be like this. Yeah, okay. So this is what happens. So this part is called the gray matter, and then this is called the white matter. Okay, so this is what we call a reflex arc, and there are questions that can come here. You need to study this thing very carefully. Okay, all right, so in our next video we are going to talk about the organs, okay, the sense organs. But before we look at the sense organs, we are going to discuss the we're going to talk about the CNS. We said the CNS made up of the brain and the spinal cord, and we're going to look at the brain. So watch out for the next video after this. We talk about the brain, okay, all these parts of the brain. We'll discuss them nicely, and here we'll look at a number of things. Okay, so I hope I see you in my next video. Okay, if you're new to the channel, please click the subscribe button, like and share the video with your classmates, your friends, your family. Just give us that support to appreciate it. So I hope you've learned something in this section.